Hey Ava, this is Miss Tracy. So I'm going to help you through those problems that you sent me that you're still kind of struggling with completing the square. So I've got it broken down into 5 steps for you that you need to write down. This is the method. This is all we're doing. And the point of it is we can't factor this problem. We can't. It's just the numbers don't work out. So what we want to do is, find a way to solve for x. And this is like a synthetic factoring method, or it's like we're making it factorable. We're changing, or we're adding a value to it to make it to where we can factor it. And in order to do that, we've got to separate some of these terms to kind of get it, where we can put a synthetic number in there, like a number we've generated. And in order to do that, we've got to put the x terms on one side and the non-x terms on the other side. So that's the first step. So we take the non-x, which is the 7, and here we're taking it away. So in order to move it, we are going to add it. In order to get rid of it from this side, we have to add it. But to keep the equation balanced, we have to do that to both sides. So that's the rule that moves it from one side to the other. So we have x squared plus 4x left on this side, and then a positive 7 on this side. So the first step is just to separate our terms, x terms versus no x. All right, the x terms on one side, no x on the other side. And the equation or the equal sign is in the middle. Now we're going to create that synthetic number, or that additional value that's going to allow us to factor the left side. To do that, we take this term with the x term, the coefficient with the x term, and we divide this coefficient by 2. So that's it. We've got the 4 here, 4x. We take that 4, we divide it by 2, and it's a 2. So now we take that number, the second part of that is we square it. We square whatever that division by 2 is, and then that's the number we add to both sides. So we add that 4, and we add that 4. The next step, once we have balanced both sides by adding that additional term, is to factor the right side into a perfect square. So we're going to factor this. We don't even have to try, we could factor this the old-fashioned way and say, oh, well, what factors of this give me this? We don't have to do that. We already know what that is because it gives it to us right here. Because it tells us that 2 squared is that 4. So that's the factor we're looking for. So this factored is going to be x, and then whatever this number is, squared. X, whatever that number is, squared, all in parentheses, right? So this is this. This is this. We're just simplifying. We're really just simplifying both sides on this third step right here, right? This was step 1. This was step 2. And this is step 3. We factored the right side into a perfect square, and when we did that, we went ahead and did this simple math right here. Right? Now we've got to get x by itself. We've got to unsquare both of these sides. Because this is squared, we need to unsquare it. Because it's a perfect square, we can do that. Just like whenever we have 4, 4 is a perfect square. We know that that equals the square root of 2 times the square root of 2, right? So that means that the answer is 2 because it has identical factors. When you have identical factors, then, the square root of this times the square root of itself is going to be the base, whatever the base is. That's just like saying square root of 4 is 2 times 2. So we get that perfect square, those identical factors, and that becomes the answer on the outside. Okay? All right, so I'm going to take all this reference out. This is just a refresher. So because this is a perfect square, we're going to unsquare. I'm just going to go ahead and write it out so you can see it instead of taking a shortcut. Now, if we unsquare this side, we have to unsquare this side. And I put that plus or minus just because we don't know if this is a positive times a positive or a negative times a negative. We know what this is because we factored it. We know that it's positive. That's given to us in this value here. We know it's positive already, so we don't have to guess. So we pull this out, and whenever we do that, these cancel each other. So then this becomes x plus 2 is equal to plus or minus square root of 11. This is step 4. This is where we unsquared it and simplified it. Now we solve for x. This is the final step, step 5. All we have to do to get x by itself is take this 2 away. Because we have x plus 2, we just need to get x. So we got to take the 2 off. If we do it to this side, because it's an equation, we have to do it to this side. So these would cancel. X is equal to negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 11. And that's your answer. This is as far as you have to go. This is resolved. We can't do anything more here because this is a prime number. And the factors of 11 are 1 times 11. We can't pull anything out that we can, in our head. We can't do it on paper. We could get the calculator and do it, but that's not what the Saxon curriculum wants us to do. He just wants us to take it as far as our brains understand it. That's all he wants us to be able to see. Because it doesn't matter what the actual final answer is. What matters is that you understand the process. And taking it this far tells me you understand the process and how to get there. Okay? This is not the finished answer, but it's very complete in that anybody can look at this and plug it into a calculator and get the final answer. Right? So this is as far as you have to go. Once you get to what x is equal to, you don't have to do any more calculations unless they are easy in your head calculations or easy on paper calculations. And we'll have a couple of those, I'm sure, as we look at the other problems. So this would be step 5, where you got x by itself, and then you have some calculation over here that has to be done. Okay, and it's a calculation that you can't just do on paper pretty easily. This is where he wants you to stop. All right, so let's look at the next one, and we're going to use the same 5 steps to do it. Okay, I'm going to leave this up. Okay, this is the next problem. So our first step is to separate the terms, x versus no x. So the x terms stay over here, and the no x terms get removed. So we're going to add this 5 to both sides so that we can move it over. So now we have all of our x terms here and our non-x term over here. So that was step 1. All right, now step 2. We're going to divide the x coefficient by 2, and it's different this time. So this time, the x term is the 2. So 2 divided by 2 equals 1. And if I square it, 1 squared is equal to 1, because 1 times 1 is 1, right? This is the one we add to both sides. So plus 1, plus 1. Now, this is step 2. That's what we did. Now we're going to factor the right side into a perfect square. And we don't even have to think about it. We know what that number is. It's already given to us. So that's going to be x, and it's a positive 1 squared. When we factor this, this is what we get. We get x plus 1 times x plus 1. And then we just simplify this by adding it together. That's going to be 6. Now, this is step 3. Now we're going to do step 4. We're going to unsquare both sides. And we're going to do that through the use of the radical symbol. So the radical symbol and the exponent of 2 cancel each other out. So we have x plus 1 is equal to plus or minus square root of 6. So this was step 4, right? That gives us the simplified form right here. Now we just solve for x. So we're going to subtract 1 from both sides. And we get x by itself. -1 plus or minus square root of 6. The factors of 6 are 2 times 3. There are no identical factors in that, so we can't do anything else with that. This is x's value. That is the value of x. We have solved for x. That's as far as we can go. All right, it's the same 5 steps every single time. The same 5 steps. All right, let's do the next problem. All right, here's the next one. Step 1, separate terms. So we have the x terms and the non-x terms. We're going to separate those by moving it over, by adding 8 to both sides. So this becomes x squared plus 3x on this side and a positive 8 on this side. Now we're going to do step 2. We're going to find that middle term, that x coefficient, and divide it by 2. And let me erase all of this so we can solve that right here. In this case, that middle term is a 3. So we're going to say 3 over 2. We can't really resolve that, right? Algebra prefers an improper fraction, so we leave it as an improper fraction. So this is just as far as we can go with that. But now that's A. So now we're going to do B. We're going to square it and add it to both sides. So when I square this and add it to both sides, 3 times 3 is 9, and 2 times 2 is 4. So I'm going to add 9 over 4 to both sides. Now when I do that, I'm recognizing that 8 is a whole number, right? It's over 1, right? So I want to be able to combine these together. So I'm going to change this to a denominator that is 4. So I'm going to multiply the top and the bottom by 4. So when I do that, I say 8 over 1 times 4 over 4 is equal to 32 over 4, right? So that's what I'm going to change that to. 32 over 4. That's going to allow me to add these two together in the next step. So this was step 1. This is step 2. Now we're going to do step 3. We're going to factor the right side. And when I do that, I'm going to simplify the left. So I don't even have to think about how to factor this. I know what that number is because it was given to me already. So it's going to be x plus 3 over 2 squared. Whatever this number is here, that's this number here. Okay? That is where that comes from. And this is, now we can add this together. 32 plus 9 is 41 over 4. So that is step 3. Now I'm going to do step 4 and unsquare both sides. So when I unsquare both sides, right, this cancels. So this becomes x plus 3 over 2. And this, we know that when we have this, that this is equal to this. So that allows me to go ahead and solve this one. So it is 41 over 2. So I can resolve that or simplify that a little bit more. So then this becomes plus or minus the square root of 41 over 2. This was step 4. So now I just have to solve for x, and I do that by just getting x by itself. So minus 3 over 2 on both sides. So x is equal to negative 3 over 2 plus or minus square root of 41 over 2. And that's your solution number 5. So even if you can't divide it, you can still get an answer. It's just going to be a fraction. Just leave it like a fraction. If you can divide it into a whole number, that's awesome. But a lot of times you can't. So we just leave it as a fraction and carry on with the math the way that we know how to. So let's look at the next step. We're going to do those same 5 steps all over again. Or the next problem, I should say. All right, here's the next one. So at first glance, you look at this and you go, oh, I could probably factor that. But it's the signs that throw us off. So we can't, if we get a negative 4, that's going to be either a negative 4 times 1, which would give us a negative 3, or a positive 4 times 1, negative 1, which would give us a positive 3, or negative 2 times positive 2, which gives us 0. So we can't factor it because the signs are different and it's just kind of messed up. So we will separate the terms, the x terms on this side and the non-x terms on this side. So this is step 1. We're going to add 4 to both sides. So we eliminate the non-x terms and move it over so that we have x squared plus 2x is equal to 4. Okay, so I'm going to now move on to step 2. I'm going to take the x term, the single x, and I'm going to take the coefficient and divide it by 2. So here I've got 2 divided by 2, which equals 1. And then that is A right here, right? And B, I'm going to square it. So 1 squared is equal to 1. And now I'm going to add it to both sides. That was step 2. Easy peasy. Now step 3, I'm going to factor the right side into a perfect square. And when I do that, I'm going to go ahead and add this together just to simplify as I go. So I already know that this is my factor here. I don't even have to think about it. So it's x plus 1 squared is equal to 5. All right, that's step 3. Now I'm going to unsquare both sides. So when I do that, recognize that 5 is a prime number. We can't factor it out. That's as far as we can go with it. So when we unsquare this, we get x plus 1 is equal to plus or minus the square root of 5. This is as far as we can go. So I'm going to subtract 1. This was step 4. I'm going to subtract 1 from both sides to get x by itself. So I can solve for x. I get negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 5. And this is step 5, where we solve for x. Same 5 steps every single time. Okay? Let's look at the next one. I think there's one more. All right, so this is the last one. Now this one is a little bit tricky because it's not so neatly arranged for us. We have to do some rearranging. So I want you to rearrange this into step 1. Pause the video, do it on your own paper, and then you can press play and see if you have what I have, okay? So go ahead and pause, and then put it into step 1. All right, I'm going to assume that you've paused and that you've done this step. So what we've got to do is we've got to get the x terms over here, and the non-x terms over here. So to do that, I've got to add 7x to both sides. And then I've got to add 9 to both sides to take it away from this side and move it. So this cancels and this cancels. So what I have left is x squared plus 7x is equal to 9. And that is step 1 done. All right, so step 2, remember, we take the x term, which is the x by itself, not the x squared, but we take the middle term here, and we're going to divide it by 2, square it, and add it to both sides. All right, so pause the video, do step 2 on your paper, and then press play to see if you and I have the same answer. Okay, I'm going to assume that you paused and that you did the next step, step 2. So we're going to take the x term 7 and divide it by 2. We can't evenly divide that. That would be like 3.5. And we don't want to use mixed numbers in algebra. We want to use improper fractions. So we leave it like this. So that's A. The B part is going to be to take this and square it. So then that becomes 49 over 4, because 7 times 7 is 49 and 2 times 2 is 4, right? This is the number we add to both sides. So plus 49 over 4 plus 49 over 4. That should be what you have for step 2. All right, now to complete this, in order to combine this in step 3, I've got to change this to have a denominator of 4. So I'm just going to go ahead and write that here for the sake of making sure that I can add these. So 4 times 9 would be 36 over 4 plus 49 over 4. And it's the exact same thing that's in here. It's just that I changed this to a fraction with the same denominator. That's all that is. This is still step 2. Step 3. So before I do it, I want you to pause the video and I want you to do step 3, okay? So pause and put it in step 3. All right, I'm going to assume that you paused and that you did step 3. Step 3 is to factor the right side into a perfect square. Well, we don't even have to think about it, do we? We know, based on this right here, what that square is. It's going to be x plus 7 over 2 squared. This is this side factored. Now we can combine these two, 36 plus 49. That's going to be 85, I do believe. Yes, 85 over 4. So now this is simplified, and this is step 3. That's what you should have. Now we need to move on to step 4. So step 4 is to unsquare both sides. So I want you to pause and do step 4 on your paper, and then let's see if we match. All right, I'm going to assume that you paused and that you did step 4. And this is what step 4 would look like. It would look like unsquaring this on both sides. And then we would further solve it by canceling. We would have x plus 7 over 2 is equal to plus or minus. We can't undo 85, so we leave it as square root of 85, but we can unsquare 4 and turn that into a 2. So that would be step 4. So I want you to pause and solve for x. Do step 5 for me. All right, so step 5 is probably the easiest one of all. We just take whatever's over here and move it over here through the opposite operation. So our answer is for x, our solution for x is -7/2 plus or minus square root of 85/2. And that is our solution. Okay? If you got all of these, then you know what you're doing now. And I know that if you do enough of these over time, you'll start to see how it works and understand the theory behind. All we're doing is we know we can't factor the original equation. We know we can't factor it. So we are just rearranging the values and creating a value that we can add to both sides that we know we can factor. And we know we can factor it because we take this term here that and we manipulate it in such a way, the dividing it by 2 and squaring it. That's what happens when we have this this term. That's what happens when we factor. So I want you to think about, let's say we have, I don't know. Let me think about something. If we have a trinomial term that we factor, we look at the factors and we figure out our factors and then we combine them. To have a perfect square, whatever that term is here is this number divided by 2 and squared every single time. That's just how it works. That's how a perfect square works. So we're just going in the reverse to find out what that number is so that we can factor it. We just have to add it to both sides to make sure the equation stays balanced. So understanding why we're doing what we're doing will help you to understand how to do what we're doing. If this does not help you, let me know, and I will see if I can find a better explanation than what I can do. Maybe I can send you a resource from someone else online that really helps you understand it or breaks it down better than I can. But that's all I have for you for these 5 problems. If you have any more questions, please don't stop. Don't give up. At the same time, you're going to do this again next year. You're going to see it again. You don't have to get it this year because you will get it again next year in Algebra 2. So you have time to learn it. Don't stress, okay? It's just math. It's just math. You're not going to be completing the square at the grocery store whenever you're shopping, right? So it's just understanding how it works for application in college and further math if you continue that. So if this is the one thing you don't get from Algebra 1, you'll get it in Algebra 2. Or, your life is not going to be horribly changed because you don't know how to complete the square. Not everybody understands all of it. And that's okay. It's okay. So, don't freak out about it. Don't worry. Don't lose sleep, is what I'm saying, over math. It'll be fine. Much as I love it, it'll be fine. Keep asking for help, and I'll see you when I see you. Bye for now.